29 years of service, right? And it was all with the CIA. But what would be maybe the most dangerous scenario you found yourself in?
It's when you know you're talking to somebody who has blood on their hands. When people would ask me, what should I read about to understand the Middle East? I'd never tell them read histories. I'd say, read The Godfather. Like, you want to understand how these things operate, that's how they operate.
It's not black and white, right? It's not cut and dry. They're not, is it evil?
And it's also not a huggable moment. It's sometimes you got to punch somebody in the nose. It's kind of like the bully on the playground.
So who's the bully and who needs to be punched in the nose?
Everybody in the world remembers except the Americans. We were all into Afghanistan for a while, and then Johnny Depp decided to get divorced from Amber Heard. We're being distracted. Other countries remember, and they remember what we've done.
The director of the FBI said it's not if we're going to get attacked, it's when.
Right. Look, again, we've been attacked every single day. There's been a mass casualty event every single day. We're under attack. I'm really a happy person, by the way. Like, I'm usually not this.
You are a happy person.
I
You know
know,
what's funny? I say the same things to people because of my background, and people look at me, I'm like, no,
awful.
I'm actually a really warm person.
It's just like, here comes the grim reaper to tell me about how our society is about to collapse on itself.
Okay.
Want a drink?
Can you explain to me what the title is that you held? Because I know there's different functions and titles for people who work within the CIA.
Right. So I spent my career as a case officer. Well, I think now it's called more of an operations officer. So my job was to basically conduct operations overseas, meeting sources, identifying people that might be good for that, recruiting them, writing the intelligence, making sure it was, and then would go, back to Washington to go up to policymakers. So, and it was, most of my career was spent overseas. Eventually I moved up into management and was chief of station in a number of places around the world.
So I think a lot of people think an agency like the CIA comes out and finds you and says to you, hey, you look amazing. We need to bring you on.
Yeah, I wish somebody would say I look amazing. So, no, it wasn't. They came to my university. So I went to college up in the Northeast. I went to Holy Cross, and I had no idea what I wanted to do in life. I knew I wanted to be in the military, but I had a leg issue from when being a kid, so I didn't qualify. And the agency was interesting to me. My father was military. I wanted to serve in some way. So I tried to State Department, CIA, NSA, and it worked, surprisingly. So I went through the application process. So.
What's that process like? Like if somebody's like interested in it, because I teach criminal justice criminology, and a lot of my students will ask me about something like this. So, but what is that process like, the hiring process?
Right. It's changed since I was there. I'm a little bit older now. But right now, if anyone's interested, they go online, they apply online, essentially. And the place it's very passive aggressive. Applying to any government job is passive aggressive. I used to joke, it's like dating in college. You date and then you never hear from them again. And then maybe you'll hear a year later. So the agency is kind of very similar. So you go online, you explore what the various options are. Are you interested in operations? Are you a very outgoing person? Are you more of an analytical, academic? Do you want to be, an analyst? There's all kinds of things. That's one of the things that really surprised me about the agency when I got in there. Is you think it's Jack Ryan, it's Jason Bourne, it's all of this, and there's bits and pieces of that. But it's also there's accountants and engineers and really so many different things. And so you go online, you decide which one you're kind of interested in, and essentially they'll contact you, and let you know. And the process moves from there. It's a slow process. So people get really frustrated, like, well, I need to know. I'm like, well, good luck. I mean, it's what I tell people is like, if you got a job offer from JP Morgan, take it. You might get a phone call in a year where somebody says, hey, we'd like to bring you in. And you go from there.
I remember too in the Secret Service, it was like that. And I had applied to like Secret Service, FBI, and it's just a very long process. You don't hear from anybody for a long time. Are you able to share any part of like what some of the things are as far as within the hiring process that they look for? What is that like?
Yeah, I get that question a lot. Should I study international relations? Should I study? There's a lot of intelligence programs out there now. What I tell people is study whatever you're interested in, because they're going to teach you whatever you need to know. If you need to become smart on nuclear engineering, they're going to teach you that. They're going to teach you, like they taught me a language. I speak Arabic now. I didn't speak Arabic then. A lot of the things I worked on, I had no idea about. When I walked in there, I was just some kid that grew up in central Massachusetts, went to Catholic schools, was afraid of everybody, and was guilty for everybody else's sins. That's what I was, right? And so I guess I was ideal for the polygraph. But you go in there and they'll teach you. So if we had people that were lawyers, we had people I was a history major, English majors, classics majors, religion majors, all kinds of stuff. It's who you are as a person that matters.
So they look at the substance of what do you think they look for then? Like, what makes them say, you're an ideal candidate, we want you?
I think it's somebody who has the ability to listen rather than talk and is able to get along with most people. It depends. Again, like if you're an analyst, it's a little bit different skill set. I'm talking more about my skill set, which was dealing with people. If you're hard over and you are like this crazy far right, political person, you're not going to do well if you're sitting in there with somebody who may have a different political opinion than you. Same for like if you're far left. You've got to be able to listen. You have to be able to sit with people. You sit with terrorists and not want to kill them, right? And not want to strangle them, because you need to understand who they are as a person, understand where they're coming from, and be able to collect the information that you can then pass on to policymakers so that they can understand what's going on in the world. How can they make a good decision? That's the goal. And so, you kind of just have to be able to smile through it all. And I think that's one of the really strong kind of personality traits that they look for in people. And then people are just naturally curious. It's not an easy job. It takes a long time. Success is hard to achieve. And so you have to be patient. You have to be like patient, I think is a really big part of it, and be able to put a plan in place and move forward with it. And then it's kind of like baseball in a way too. Baseball is a team sport, but when you're up at bat, you're up at bat. Right? And so oftentimes you're out there on your own. You don't have a support system behind you to do whatever it is you need to do. So there has to be a strong degree of trust that you, Evie, are going to be out there. I can trust that you're going to do what you need to do, and that you're going to do it the right way and keep whoever it is you're meeting safe in the process. That is absolutely key.
So you brought up terrorists before. So in my previous career too, I have interviewed terrorists. Mm-hmm. And what makes somebody a terrorist? Like, how do they get to that place? We use this word. What makes somebody be that?
Yeah, it's sad, honestly. I spent more than 20 years in the Middle East. My wife's from Lebanon. I got to know that country really well. And you see these trends into that direction. And I don't necessarily like the term terrorist, because oftentimes it's an easy term to throw around because there's money attached to it in Washington, right? And everything goes by budgets. But what I find is that people who have no hope tend to gravitate towards these extremist groups. If you think of places like Gaza, like Libya, like Yemen, places like that, there is no hope. There is no opportunity. So where do you go? How do you chart a course for yourself? How do you take care of your kids and make sure that their lives might be better than yours is? And you go wherever the opportunities are. It's very similar, I think, in a way to inner city life here in the United States, where gangs, why does someone join a gang? They join a gang because, first of all, that's what's all around them, and then there is no hope for them to get out of whatever project they're in, and so they tend to congregate. And these groups are very similar to gangs in a way. The Wire. I don't know if you've seen The Wire.
It's that.
Very similar, right? It's when people would ask me what should I read about to understand the Middle East, I'd never tell them read histories. I'd say read The Godfather. Like, you want to understand how these things operate. That's how they operate. They operate on trust, and they operate on hope, and the hope for a better life. That's oftentimes why people are drawn to these groups. And okay, I may have to die in the process, but my family will be taken care of, because if I live and I don't have a job, I don't have an opportunity, we're going to starve. We're not going to have any opportunity anyway. So might as well do that. And it's all wrapped in religion and a misunderstanding of religion on top of that, but they don't know. And so they believe they're doing the right thing. And again, it's sad. There's if there was more opportunity, if there was better economic opportunity for them to move forward, I don't think we'd see as much extremism and as much terrorism as we're seeing.
So then I guess if you're going to solve terrorism, then how do you do that? Can you even solve it? Can you eradicate it?
I don't think you can eradicate it ever, because there's always people that are going to be on the extremes one way or the other. There's always going to be people who gravitate to those organizations for whatever reason. It's at the end of the day, it's power, it's control. That's what they want to have. I think by creating economic opportunity, hope, pathways for people, it's hard. It's not an easy thing. It's not sexy. It takes a long time. It takes money. Programs like USAID and the embassies put forward to create these opportunities for people, to create businesses, to bring people together. That's how you kind of nip it in the bud and control it. It's not going to get rid of it. You can't kill your way out of it. You can't blow your way up. I mean, look at what's going on right now in Gaza. The Israelis they've already destroyed 90% of that place. You can kill all these people. It's just going to create more hatred. It's going to create less opportunity, and it's going to gravitate people towards those groups later, or different groups in different names.
Okay, so that's a really good example with Gaza, because it's been going on now for a really long time. Everybody probably thought Israel was going to come in, and I've worked with the Israeli forces, and they're very competent forces.
Oh yeah.
So what would have been the way to actually deal with this? What would have been the best or strategic way to deal with this?
Are you talking about what happened with the attack recently with the or are you talking about historically?
Forget historically, because if we get into the history of it, I've seen so many people argue it from all the different ways, and I don't know, and you can school me, I don't know if it's that clear. It's not. Who's right or who's wrong, or whose territory it is or isn't.
Yep.
I don't know. Well, let me ask you this. Do you have any thoughts? Because you studied history.
Oh yeah. And I worked the issue. So that's one of those issues that you pick a moment in time, and depending upon when you pick, one side is right, one side is wrong. You can always justify stuff, and you can keep going back in time. You keep going back into histories and whatnot, and see, this is justifiable, this isn't justifiable, this is right, this is wrong. So I think I try not to get into those discussions, because when you start getting into them, you're never going to win, and you're never going to make any headway. Right? It's got to get to a point where both sides have felt the pain so badly that they decide enough. And it's horrible to say, but that when we saw peace in Bosnia and Serbia, that was because so many people had died that they were just exhausted from it, and they just wanted to move ahead and move into a next step. And that may be where we need to be in this situation. What happened to the Israelis was unfathomable. It was horrible. It was not only was it an intelligence mistake, but it was. I mean, more people died that day, or in the course of those couple of days, than died since the Holocaust. Right. So, and it was an existential threat to them. And I get the response. Now, is killing 30,000 people, so 15, 20 times as many, destroying the entire infrastructure of the country, or the space, the Gaza space, is that commensurate? Like, I'm not going to get into an argument, because no matter which side you take here, you're wrong, and somebody's going to hate you for it. But you have to decide, when do you start thinking next steps? What's the solution here? Because nobody wants these people, right? Nobody's going to take them. The Egyptians aren't going to take them. That's
what I've been curious about. Why doesn't Egypt take them? So if all these people are suffering, which they are, right?
Yeah.
Why won't Egypt take them?
It's a broad, and I'll talk about that, but it's a broader question. The interesting thing to me is, everybody in the world remembers except the Americans. We have the worst memories of anybody, right? So, and we get distracted so much. My wife told me not to talk about this, but I always do, right? We were all into Afghanistan for a while, and then Johnny Depp decided to get divorced from Amber Heard, right? Sorry, Maria, she told me not to use that example, but it's true, right?
True.
And we stopped caring.
True.
We stopped Ukraine, what, right? And then we went to Gaza, and then the Queen passed, and now we've got the election. Joe Biden can't remember anything, right? This is we're being distracted. Gaza was on the headlines for the longest time. Now it's not. We're not really paying attention. No one's really paying attention to Ukraine, only because Tucker Carlson decided to interview Putin, right? And so people will be interested to see what a crazy train that was, right? So that becomes the issues. The Middle East, though, other countries remember, right? And they remember what we've done, right? So we go into, and if you can just keep going back in time, you can go back. So you have Gaza now, you've got Ukraine before that, you got Afghanistan before that, right? Don't forget, like we were in Afghanistan for 20 years or more. We killed a lot of people in Afghanistan, right? They don't forget that. What we were like, hey, no harm, no foul. Hey, we're out. All good, right? We move forward. Before that, there was Iraq. Before Iraq, there was, what was before Iraq? Libya. Before Libya, there was Palestine. Before that, and every single time when we commit to something and we don't follow it through and we move on to something else, we forget, they remember. So that's the situation in Gaza. If you look back, and this is real simplistic, I'm sure people will say you're not right, John, but the way I remember it, when Syria happened, there were massive numbers of people that were fleeing Syria, and they went to the border of Jordan. And when they got to the border, the Jordanians were like, no thanks. Like, we don't want to have like hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of people coming across the border. The U.S. committed to supporting it, and which we did for a period, then we stopped. So if you're in Egypt, are you going to then say, oh, sure, come on over? Of course, the U.S. and the West will make commitments, but how long are those commitments going to be good for? And will we be there? And will we sustain the support? Because Egypt has its problems. It has economic problems, stability issues. You bring in that many people into an area, how are you going to support them? It's destabilizing on a whole number of levels. So it's not as easy, as straightforward as one would think. Plus, for a lot of Gazans, that's home. That's their home. They don't want to leave there. And they want to go back and they want to rebuild it. That's where their families are from and whatnot. So there's a lot of other kind of little factors in there where it'd be like, oh, this is easy. Just like, put them over there temporarily. Well, temporarily ends up becoming a lot longer. I mean, ask the Lebanese with the Palestinian camps that are there, the Jordanians with the Palestinian camps that are there as well. When these things happen, they say, okay, it's only temporary. Well, they've had them for 50, 60 years, 40, 30 years. The cost, the impact on the culture as well. Jordan has dealt with that numerous times over its history, with the Iraq War, with the Syria War, with massive numbers of people coming in, diluting their population, and then alienating the locals from the king and the leadership and causing kind of a destabilizing force. So unfortunately it's not as black and white, and it's not just cutting a check once.
It's interesting because as I'm listening to you speak, I'm thinking about the interviews that I had done. I would go in if there was intel that was related to the mission of the U.S. Secret Service, right? So if it was, I'm going to blow up New York, I was not sent. Right. But if it was, I'm going to blow up New York, and by the way, I want to kill the president, then they would send somebody from my agency there. And sometimes people would think, how can you speak to a terrorist, right? How can you go in there and listen? And it would happen where I could hear the history of what they'd been through and why they had the perspective that they had. And I could understand it. I actually could understand it quite a bit. And it's not black and white, right? It's not cut and dry. They're not, I don't know, like, is it evil?
Well, it's also not a huggable moment. Like, all of these aren't, if we can just hug it out, we'll be good. Sometimes you got to punch somebody in the nose, right? And it's kind of like the bully on the playground.
So who's the bully and who needs to be punched in the nose?
Well, for instance, I mean, there's a lot of people probably who need to be, the Hamas needs to be punched in the nose. You don't do that. You don't act that way. They need to be, punched strongly in the face consistently, their leadership. Now, killing, tens of thousands of Gazans or kids and things like that, of course, nobody wants that, right? But if they feel like they can push you around, and this is any country, any people, right? If they feel like they can push you around, they will. And if you look, for instance, what Putin's doing in Ukraine, he's pushing and pushing and pushing because he knows we don't really want to get into a fight. We have a president, and I'm not going to be political here, but we have a president who was very clear, we're not going to get into more fights. We're not going to deploy forces overseas, and we're going to be reluctant to commit. Well, when you say that, that's a problem, right? Because then what's your recourse? Then what are you going to do? So right now we're sanctioning the heck out of them, and every chance we have, we're increasing sanctions, and we're putting caps on oil prices and things like that. I'm not saying that those aren't good policies, but if that's your policy, well, the Russians have shown that they can work around that. And so they'll get their stuff from China, they'll get it from India, they'll get it from Iran, North Korea, whoever it is they need to get it from. So if you start taking things off the table, if you don't stand up and punch somebody in the face solidly, then don't be surprised if they keep like sniping at you.
Do you think then with the US, given that we're not punching people in the face, do you think, I wonder this honestly, do you think we're losing our strength? You know, with a superpower. And I guess I hear this. I don't know if most people care or even understand. You know, everyone's on, I don't know, TikTok or wherever. They're more interested in Johnny Depp or getting the divorce. So do you think, why should Americans care? And like, I guess what's that disconnect? Like, should they care? And are we seeing like kind of a shift here, a decline?
I mean, it's a great point. I mean, like my world was the Middle East and terrorism and North Africa and Europe and all that. So I was focused on it, right? But when I came back from one overseas assignment and I found myself at my son's school, you know, he's in second grade. I got a baby on my hip. Nobody cared about what was going on in the Middle East. And that because it didn't touch us. I think now things are starting to touch us that didn't touch us before. We've got much more far right groups, far left groups. We're seeing, you know, the shootings daily. There's a mass shooting once a day, averaging, at least in the United States. It's impacting all upon us. In some ways, where it's becoming a little bit like white noise because we just don't want to tolerate it. But it's starting to touch us here in the country. The migrant issues, and then the potential impacts of that on the country.
I was at an anti-terrorism symposium, and you got up there to speak, and you did something amazing. You went up there and you said, I'm going to take you around the world in 15 minutes. And you took everybody around the world in 15 minutes. And you just broke it down. Can we take people around the world in 15 minutes? But why should they care? Because most people don't care because it doesn't touch them. And then the other thing that I love that you've said, and it's very tactical thinking, most people think about the present, what is happening now, and they build their plan around what's happening now. Where you said something to me, no, you have to think 3 months or 6 months, where am I going to be? And kind of those two things were pretty, like, amazing to me. So if we take those two things that you say,
yeah.
This is your saying.
Okay.
All right. And
be careful what you say, right?
So take me around the world, but why should I care?
Well, yeah, let's start on that first, because I think that is important. I get that a lot. My mom and dad, I talk to them a lot, you know, and I send them little updates of what's going on in the world, and they're like, okay, so what? You know, it's starting to touch us more personally. And one of the best anecdotes I have of this, it was probably 2 years ago. So I've got relationships with all kinds of folks around the country, right? And one of my friends, he runs a police department in Connecticut. And, you know, they're connected to the state police, the fusion centers, and all these different things all around the place. Now, I'm a retired guy from, you know, okay, I spent my career, but I'm not inside. Like, I don't know what's necessarily going on. And I have some connects, but, you know, not as probably good as he has. And he calls me up and he says, John, I really need your help. And I'm like, what happened? He goes, well, all of a sudden, 200 Afghan refugees showed up at the Motel 6 down the road. And I'm like, okay. And he goes, we don't know where they came from. We don't know who's paying for them. We don't know anything. They just showed up and moved in. I'm like, okay. He goes, can you find out what's going on? I'm like, how the hell am I supposed I'm like, oh, okay.
Wow.
Well, no, but it was, to me, that was really telling about how this is really touching people and how there's really a lack of understanding about what's going on, and a lack of, it's not transparency. It's just, I think everyone's overwhelmed, right? And I said, well, did you call State Department? And I was like giving him advice, and he's like, who do I call? I don't know anybody there. And you know, he just was overwhelmed, and his community was really shaken by this. Not that they were unwelcoming, but they're like, wait a minute, like, what? How does this just happen? And it's happening all over the country. I think people are just showing up. We're talking about New York and the migrant crisis, and you know, these Venezuelans who beat the crap out of a couple of NYPD people, and now they're chasing them down in Arizona. You know, the lack of the criminal justice system to prosecute these people or just release them. I mean, those are the strategic issues. The more real issues are, I'm Joe Schmo and I live in, you know, I don't know, Montana or Minnesota or wherever, and all of a sudden all these people are showing up in my town. Who's paying for them? Who's going to take care of them? Is this a threat? Is this something I have to worry about? We're starting to see more of that, I think. People are also, there's the level of violence that's happening, and the inability of police to really respond to some things, whether it's because of how the judges are releasing people in criminal justice reform or lack thereof, or just they don't have people, that people don't want to be police officers anymore, or they're not willing to step out and do what they need to do because they don't feel like people have their backs. We've never had this in our country before. We've never had this level. We've had problems before, but I don't think nothing like this without really like an end game at play. And it's the partisanship that's out there is not helping it. So I think things are becoming much more real for people. And overseas is touching us a lot more than it has in the past. 9/11 was a horrific thing, right? And that touched us. But that's 20 years ago, 22 years ago. My kids were born after that. They understand it because I've taught them about it, but they don't understand it like you and I did, who, had friends that were probably, impacted directly by this. So when you take that and then you decide, am I going to go around the world? Everyone gravitates to the big issues, the Ukraines, the Gaza and places like that. And to your point, I'll focus on those. I'll talk about, where are we looking at 3 to 6 months from there? How is that going to impact on us? But to me, it's more important of like, what's really going to impact on us as Americans and our lives coming forward? What's the main issue, right? To me, for me, and it boils down, there's a few, like the elections, I think are going to be really resonate. And all of those other issues feed into it, the elections. Cyber threats, and I don't think we ever focus enough on those because those can impact us.
So we hear the term cyber attack. So what does that look like? Like, what is a cyber attack?
Well, I think we see a lot of companies compromised already, right? These things are going on a regular basis. CISA is like an amazing organization. People need to like go online and look up CISA, and they protect America's critical infrastructure. And mostly from cyber attacks and whatnot. So they will talk about trends and things like that. Look, you could have a huge attack that takes out the East Coast, or like the power grids, the water systems and things like that. Personally, I don't think that's what we're going to see, because let's say Russia decides one day it's going to take out the power grid, right? We have to do something, right? We can't not do something. And cyber is one of those things where I don't think at this point it's not really clear like what's an attack and what isn't. And meaning like, how do we respond? Is this attack sufficient enough for us to have to respond with a military response or not? How do we do that? Do we then take out their power grid? Then is that considered to be an existential threat? Then would lead to a nuclear war? Like there's a lot of like kind of those questions. What I see happening more, and again, this is just based on just my own thinking here, is that it would be much more specific. So I think it was about 2 years ago, there was a cyber attack in Florida on a reservoir, where they were able to release something into the reservoir and compromise the integrity of it. That affects that area. Now, what if you had that happen, not on a massive scale, it hits the whole United States, but maybe in 10 or 15 different locations, small locations. You don't take down New York City, but you take down, I don't know, Westchester County or Rockland County or Rockville, Maryland, or certain places, and really kind of cause disruption. Those are the kind of things that I think, that could be compromised. There's a sense that out there at the nation states understand how our grid is set up, and not just our grid, but also how the internet's set up. So to me, it's going to be, if we see anything like that, I think it's going to be much more regional. I don't think we're going to have a 9/11 event, because there has to be a response to it. And I don't think anybody wants to wake us up, because look, we're really good at fighting each other, right? Because right now that's pretty clear. But when you piss us off and you do something like a 9/11, or there's a big attack, we come together and we don't let go. America doesn't forget, right? You hurt us, we don't forget. And so I don't think anybody's ready for that. The Chinese, nobody's powerful enough to be able to confront us on that. But if you snipe at us, right, here and there, we tend to be like, kind of like, was it like the bear? So it's just like, it's, and they keep doing it. Look, and these attacks keep happening. And fentanyl, again, I think a lot of these become white noise in a way because maybe it doesn't touch on us, but that is an immense problem. The FBI just did a big bust in LA. They took down, I was talking to one of the guys out there, I think it was like 40 kilos of fentanyl. It was enough to kill all of Los Angeles. It's just frightening, like what this thing can do and how the impact it's going to have on people. But we can step back if you want. We can kind of circle the globe for a little bit if you'd like, and then we can kind of delve into the. I'm really a happy person, by the way. Like I'm usually not this.
Happy person.
I know.
What's funny? I say the same things to people because of my background, and people look at me. I'm like, no, awful. I'm actually a really warm person.
It's just like here comes the grim reaper to tell me about how our society's about to collapse on itself.
Okay.
Want a drink? Like
well,
I'm like.
But you know what? I mean, I don't know if people live in reality or in truth.
Yeah.
And so sometimes. You brought up 9/11. So I was at the World Trade Center 9/11. U.S. Secret Service, our headquarters was there.
Right.
So I lived through that 20-something years ago, and I see, like, it's history now for people. Oh, that thing that happened back then. And in fact, I think it was recently, the FBI director held some conference down in Washington, D.C. I think it was a conference for some local law enforcement sheriffs. And he came out, according to the reports that I was reading, and the director of the FBI said it's not if we're going to get attacked, it's when we're going to get attacked.
Yeah. But, and I think people put in their minds that we're going to get attacked like we got attacked in 9/11. And it may not be like that significant of an attack. It could be lots of smaller attacks. Look, again, we've been attacked every single day. There's been a mass casualty event every single day, right? Think about that. Now, maybe it didn't happen in your neighborhood. Maybe it happened somewhere else. But every single day, we're under attack.
You're talking about shootings.
Shootings, right? Yeah, mass shootings. I mean, that are happening every single day. 3, 4, however many people are being killed. You have to give pause. People, it's common now to teach your children what to do, where to go in schools. Like that never happened when I was a kid, right? We planned for nuclear bombs, right? We went under the desk, but seriously, I mean, that's something that I think about too with my kids. I was talking to my sons are like 20s, late teens and 20s. One's in college, and I tell them, if you see something on your car door, don't touch it, right? Don't take a drink from somebody that you don't see if they open the bottle, like things that you wouldn't necessarily tell people because I'm afraid that there might be fentanyl on that, or there could be something dangerous to them, and inadvertently they could get hurt. And to spread the stories to their friends, all these things.
The thing with the car door, what is it that you're seeing?
Well, again, these are just kind of things I'm hearing where people will they'll either put money under your windshield wiper for you to take, and then they'll use that a lot of times for girls. And then the girls will take the money and then somebody will attack them and grab them, or that they put some kind of chemical on doors, and they can just leave it behind. You see things on the ground or on the floor that normally you would pick up to help or give to somebody. Don't touch anything. I mean, it's really a weird time to have to think that way and to view everything as a threat. Normally, again, in the United States, we always felt we were insulated. Right? We were always fine. And then we go to the war zones and then we would be careful. Right? I don't know if they taught you this in the service. I mean, one of the things we learned was the red, yellow, green, kind of like, green. We're in a green zone right now. We're not worried about anything happening to us, right? We don't have to look over our shoulder, be careful. If you're in the war zones, you're in red. Right? When you're out there and you feel like you need to be aware of, if you're protecting with the president or something, you're always red. But you can only stay red so long. You can only have that much focus for a certain amount of time before your system just collapses. Right? Yellow being somewhere in the middle. Like I'm walking down the street in New York, I'm probably yellow. Like, okay, some guy's getting a little bit close to me or somebody, what are they doing? Do I need to be careful? What's going on in that corner? I hear a loud noise. So we have to be more in the yellow and red zones than we've ever had to be. And that to me we're losing. Like when we kind of lose that we're losing the war, so to speak.
I have a background in forensic psychology.
Right.
And, I have certain thoughts, but what do you think is going on? Because you're right, like something's off. What is it?
I wish I knew. If I knew, like, you might have the answer, but I'm a history major, right? So like, but I think we're losing everything is adversarial now, right? We can't find any common ground to come together on things. The default is to fight, right? I mean, like whether it's road rage, whether it's you're at McDonald's and the burger didn't come out exactly how you wanted it, and okay, I'm going to pull out, and a lot of people are carrying weapons now and defaulting to that. There's an anger out there, which I don't really understand why we have it. We're so blessed in so many ways in this country. We have so much, right? And I don't know where it's coming from. And there's a them culture and not an us culture to America. When I grew up, and I think when we all grew up, I've seen the shift overseas a bit, with embassies too. Embassies were these welcoming places pre 9/11. And I understand, when you get attacked, you have to put up defenses. But the libraries at the embassies were always welcoming places and whatnot. Now, even if you're an American and you go up to an American embassy, you got to be careful. Like, it's not like, hey, welcome. It's, what are you doing here? What do you want? Like, what's the whole purpose? And we send out those messages kind of, I think,
very fear-based.
Yeah.
We're afraid of everything.
We're afraid of everything, and everyone's out after us.
Everyone's out to get us.
Right. And so, I think there's a lot of good out there. Look, I'm making everything sound like horrible. Like and I think a lot of people worry democracy is threatened and the country is threatened and things like that. We're an incredibly powerful country. We're incredibly resilient. We have wonderful people doing wonderful things to help people. I have a son who's special needs, and the generosity and the things I see people do for him is just makes me want to cry. I mean, it's just like, I wish I could be that good and be that patient. So I'm not trying to say like as in general, but we have to be more aware now than I think we ever have had to have been about, and I think and that's just not who we are as people.
I think it's really interesting because I'm a mom too, and I think about my daughter, and I think about what I want to teach her, right? With your kids, so you have a unique background. Like you did, how many years? Was it 29 years of service, right? And it was all with the CIA.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a very long time, right? It's a very long time.
It's a long time.
To do a very hard job. So what have you tried to teach your sons? Like, what's been the most important things you've been trying to teach them?
Right. I want my sons to be good people, to do the right thing, right? And to have faith in the system and in each other. I mean, to me, that's the most important part, to give people the benefit of the doubt until they prove that they're not worth it. As opposed to going into things it's okay to have your eyes open, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't be respectful and you shouldn't be trusting. You can be trusting until the point where people don't deserve the trust. That's my philosophy and how to move forward. And people let you down, and you always I teach them, take the high road. I guess when you've been to war zones too. I've been to war zones. Nobody's getting killed here. Like nobody's life is threatened in these situations, and we immediately go high and right. And I'm like, look, we'll work through it, and then we move on. We take the high road, and we're done with it. And to me, that's more important. And I think people look at that. This is why, the U.S. Why do people love America, right? Because there's opportunity. Because we're good people. People love Americans. They don't like our government, but they love Americans, right? And why do they love Americans? They love Americans because we're friendly, we're nice, we're open, we're generous, we're kind, right? In general, right? We're a bit naive, but in a way, in a kind of a lovable way. And we give people the benefit of the doubt. We create opportunities. It doesn't matter what your family's name is. If you can do the job, if you can do if you have the right, if you work for it, you can get it. That's why people love us. And that's basically when I try to teach my kids, try every opportunity, build friendships, build networks, take care of your friends before you take care of yourself, because karma comes back and it helps us, and I've seen that happen so many times, and blessings I've been so blessed on so many levels, despite, like we all have challenges, we all have difficult times and things.
Based on what you're seeing, what do you think would be the most important thing parents should do to try to raise, like what virtue would you say that they need to look at, or what skill or what tangible thing you think is the most important thing for today a parent to try to do based on like what you've experienced and seen?
I think it's compassion. teaching your kids to be compassionate and to be really grateful for what they have, and not to take anything for granted. All of this, we could lose it tomorrow, right? I'm a wonderful home. All these things could go like that. I think COVID showed us that, right? That the world can change really, really fast.
But see, COVID happened, but people didn't get better from it. I don't know if people appreciated.
I think some people did. I think a lot of people got cynical from it. They viewed it very stark terms, but I think a lot of people got closer to their families because of it. A lot of people got divorced because of it, because they had to spend more time with their families, right? But I think a lot of people realized, how quickly things could collapse. The need to prepare also, I think, is important. And I'm not saying go out there and buy like 15,000 gallons of water and put it in your basement, but to be prepared to understand what's going on. If you live in this little cocoon, then you're going to then you're not going to be ready to deal with whatever it is you have to deal with.
So how do you prepare then?
You read, you make yourself informed, right? And I think you try not to get sucked into the issue. Like, it's hard because nowadays everything's partisan, right? What news am I going to watch? How am I going to get my news? Everything's got a tilt to it. If I watch Fox, it's too far right. If I watch CNN or MSNBC, it's too far left. Where do I read? What do I see? And I get asked this all the time. Where do you get your news from? Right?
You know,
where
that was one of my questions. And I do the news. Yeah. I go on the networks and I cover stories.
Right.
And you're absolutely right. So where do you get your news?
I get it from everywhere. I watch all those channels. I will watch Jazeera. I like foreign ones sometimes. They give a little bit better perspective because they don't get sucked into the partisan nature of it. So BBC is really good. Some of the ones from Europe aren't bad. Middle East ones as well. And then what I do is then I start, if it's an issue that's important to me, then I'll dig into it to find out what's really going on and talk to people. Open myself, read books. There's a lot of really good podcasts. Yours as being one, but there's a ton out there. There's a ton of information, and that's where I try to kind of pick and choose, and I try not to let the issues drive me, right? Because to your earlier point, I try not to look at what's going on now. It's more what's coming. How do I prepare for what's coming? I don't like to be surprised, right? And I like to be able to think a couple of steps ahead down the road. Am I always right? No, but at least I've thought, and that way you don't really get surprised. What I try to make people aware of is, on a personal level, cyber, right? Cyber can affect us. It's probably already affected a lot of people. People have probably gotten hacked in the past, Facebook accounts and things like that. We are susceptible to more of these attacks. These attacks are going on every single day. And now they may be, look, I don't think they're going to, the Russians are going to take down the East Coast, tomorrow, right? I don't feel the situation's that bad. But there is a lot of jeopardy out there. And there's a lot of, that's why I say to people all the time, make sure your stuff's backed up. Make sure if you have, kids' pictures, like I just did it like a couple of weeks ago, 50,000 pictures of my kids. Like, it's crazy, right? How many pictures we had. But if I lost them, that would really suck, right? And so like backing things up, making sure you change your passwords, double authentication, be aware of where your accounts are and where things are. Because if we lose them, if for some reason they get compromised, can we reconstitute things? Are people prepared to do that? What would they do? So I encourage people to do that. If you're in a company, make sure you have systems in place to protect your information, your people, your customers, all that information. I mean, people have been hacked, recently. It's an ongoing thing. I mean, these hacks. And we know the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians, but also these far right groups, the far left groups, the capacity to do this has been really democratized. If you got $20, you can go online to the dark web and you can get tools to do whatever it is you want to do, to blackmail people or to steal money. So it's very accessible. And so it's not nation states, yes, we have to worry about, but it's also other groups. It could be somebody you're fighting with at work who could just decide that they want to go in there and kind of screw with you. So to me, that's a real concern. Knowing what your kids are doing online. I get asked a lot of times, should we get rid of TikTok? Right? I mean, I guess, this is a Chinese.
They recently testified.
Mm-hmm, yeah. And look, I get it. I understand. But why is TikTok so popular? Because kids like it. Well, do you know what your kids are doing online? Right? I mean, honestly, I don't. Right? I don't know as much as I probably would like to. Understanding, controlling being a good parent who supervises their kids and is aware of what their kids are doing, I mean, that could obviate a lot of the problems that we're having on social media right now, right? It's kind of like TV was for our parents, and like as us, my parents would just throw me in front of the TV, like, or video games, right? Just go play in television or Atari or whatever, right? My kids are, addicted to Xbox, and this is where they communicate with their friends a lot. My kids aren't as much on social media, but these things become babysitters, de facto babysitters for a lot of people. So am I worried about what the Chinese are doing online with TikTok? Sure, I am. But I think a lot of that could be prevented if we had parents more aware of what their kids were doing, what they're posting, and giving them guidance as opposed to like letting them kind of learn from these posts that are on Instagram or Snapchat or whatever it is. I'm not very fluent in a lot of that stuff. So,
my daughter is very young. She's very young. She's still like a baby or a toddler, I guess you could say. And
right.
I have yet to put a screen in front of her,
Yeah.
any screen. And it's hard
Yeah.
because I work a lot, and I de facto, I want to be like, here, sit here. I need 5 minutes. And I haven't done it yet. I'm trying very hard not to do it because I think now that the stuff's coming out showing us what's happening, even there were studies coming from neuropsychologists that children who are growing up with devices, the gray matter in their brain is actually not developing
Right.
the way it should be. So even the development of the brain physically is being affected. So it's hard. I have no devices in my home. I mean, I don't do the phone in front of her. I don't even have a TV.
Wow.
I'm not saying it's
I'm not coming
hard.
over your house. Look at that. Like,
I'm not saying, if
that's hard.
if I go away, I can't watch, I'll watch a Hulu or Netflix. I don't have time, but it's been a challenge, but I'm really trying to, I guess, shield her brain as much as possible because I don't quite understand it yet. I see what's happening around. I mean, even as a college professor, I'm an adjunct. I teach a 3-hour criminal justice class, and I give them a break. Do you know nobody turns around to talk to the other person? As soon as I give them a break, I see
right into the phones, yeah.
I see this, and nobody knows each other's names. Nobody, and I think back to what you're saying is what's happening in the United States. I think all these things play a role in that we don't know how to talk, we don't know how to communicate. You don't know the other person, you don't know your neighbor.
Yep.
And everybody is a threat, right?
Yep.
Everybody is, who are you? What are you trying to do to me? Me.
Yep.
And I was listening to what you were trying to teach your kids, be a good person. And I want my kid to be a good person. And I don't want her to be that person that if you see something bad happening to another human being, that you just stand there and watch.
Right. Oh, the fact that people are filming it.
Oh.
Like while people are getting attacked. And then we're like, I'm going to film it so I can make sure I can post it. Like, do something. Like, get in there. Right. It's true. I was thinking back on like when I was first becoming a manager. Somebody gave me some advice. He said, my wife is a second grade teacher, and she gave me the best management advice ever. This was a friend of mine. And I'm like, what was it? He said, it's easier to be tough in the beginning and to let off than to be easy in the beginning and then tighten up. Right. So like what you're doing with your kids, I think is admirable. Like it's hard, but it's hard now. It's impossible later. Right. My kids were we tried to do that. But it was challenging given work and our own situation. And later on in life, I tried to tighten it up, and you would have thought I was like ripping their arms out of their sockets, taking the controllers away or whatever, trying to look into phones. Not that they were doing anything wrong. It was just that was a real part of their lives. So I mean, it's admirable what you're doing, and good on you, because I think your daughter will be in a better position later to be able to judge. Show a better judgment as to how to use those. The tools, those are, like, I see the positive in those too, though. But my son has autism. It's unbelievable how he can communicate through an iPad, right? He's challenged with communications and expressing himself. But I ask him anything on an iPad, he can tell me, and he can communicate it. It's amazing. And those tools are just like, so being like what you're doing, selective and using it and timing it right and making sure that it's going to be used for the right purposes is so important for us. Yeah. You
talked about the job and how you did it for 29 years and you were a manager. What do you think is the hardest thing about being in the CIA?
I think it's the same as probably anywhere else, which is dealing with people. right? I mean, it's
Your
challenging.
people or outside people?
Everybody, right? But I think internally as well, people have different expectations. Not everybody's built like me or like you, right? They have the same drive, the same motivations for doing what they do. And just making sure you can get the most out of your people and giving them opportunities to excel. To me, that was always, and that's really what I enjoyed doing later in my career, seeing the success of people that worked for me or worked with me, because I knew that success myself. It's not all about me; it's about the organization and stepping back. And I don't know if that. I think we're very fortunate. The agency, from what my understanding, there's really good people in the agency. Probably like Secret Service, right? People who are doing it for the right reasons. There's people who, but there's always been people who've done it for themselves. There's always the bottom 20% of any place, right? That are just kind of there getting a paycheck and just phoning it in. Especially now with with your remote working. How do you remote work in the agency, right? You can't, or Secret Service, you can't. But I think the personnel piece was always challenging, and just making and trying to work with people and being, it's kind of like foreign policy. It's kind of like raising a kid, right? You have to be consistent. You have to draw the lines. You have to know when to be flexible and when not to be, and then but to be consistent and honest and transparent. And sometimes that's hard to do, just given the nature of whatever it is you're doing.
You're a performer and you're a peak performer, obviously. So what do you think that you learned there that helped you be who you are today and the way you perform? Because you do a lot.
Yeah, I think look, to me, it was all about, when I sit back and if you want to be, like, to me, it was really important to be a nice person, honest. And I don't mean that be like being naive, but being a nice, compassionate, understanding person. You can work at CIA, FBI, IRS, any of these agencies, and you can be a good person, right? You have your standards, you have a moral compass, and you follow that, and you be consistent and loyal to it. These organizations, look, people have their impressions of what the agency does and whatnot, and a lot of times it's very negative. I didn't have that impression, right? I didn't, when I moved forward, my job was, I felt like I was true to myself. I was raised in a religious family. We were very close. We were very tight. And the things I learned from my Italian grandmother, my Irish grandfather, all of those things about looking out for each other, I took to the agency, and I tried to be true to that stuff. Of course, you have people that don't do that, but I'm like, well, I'm me, and they hired me for me, right? And I'm not gonna compromise who I am for anything. And I was never asked to do that. And actually, I feel like I was able to help people, and I was able to do well with the difficult jobs I had because of who I was as a person, the person my parents raised and that I became. And I was able to maybe even translate some of that onto other people so that they could continue that in the organization, to understand that you don't have to be X, Y, and Z to be successful at CIA. You can also you can be whoever you are. You can be true to yourself, whether you're Catholic, Jewish, Muslim, an atheist, whatever you want, like whatever. It doesn't really matter.
It's funny you say this because like sometimes these agencies draw, and I would hear this, I'm just type A, I'm type A, and I think sometimes people would fall on that to kind of justify being harsh or in somebody's face. And whenever I would hear type A, and even to this day, I think in myself, internally, type A for me is code for I'm type asshole. So when I'll say I'm type A to justify how I treat people.
Well, look, you can be a type A, but you don't have to be a dick, right? Like, honestly, I'm a type A personnel. I'm very active. I'm very aggressive. I'm like always planning. And I've always got to be moving. I always got to be, drives my wife crazy, right? I'm always in the mix, right? That's type A, right? But you don't have to be a jerk about it, right? Or if you're a jerk about it and you catch yourself, you apologize and you take responsibility. And that's actually, I didn't mention that about my kids. It's like, if you make a mistake, take responsibility for it. Accountability. We don't have accountability in this country anymore. We default and we point it to somebody else. It's not my fault. It's his fault. It's her fault. It's your fault. I mean, I wouldn't have said this if Evie didn't ask me. And she led me down this path. I mean, take responsibility for your own actions and know that anything is possible because of that. That's so important, I think. And I think we're losing a lot of this because of, for whatever reason. But I love that though, the A type personality.
And
For
anytime I hear it, I always hear like, here we go.
Yeah.
You're
Well,
justifying why you're going to treat somebody a certain way,
yeah.
and you do it under that guise, that umbrella.
There was a class we took early in our career, and we had partners and spouses and things in there, and they were asking. They brought everybody in, so they brought in engineers, analysts, operations people, and everything, and it was probably 100 people, 200 people in the room, and it was for new coming spouses coming into the building, and they said, okay, so when you think of a intel analyst, what do you think of? And they were just throwing out all of these. Kind of to your point, when they think of a case officer, what do you think of? And somebody's like, asshole, just used car salesman, like blah, blah, blah. And it resonated with me, like, because that's how people might have seen me in the building. And I never wanted to be that way because that's not who I am. And so I would always try to make an effort out of it. Now, was I always successful at it? Maybe, maybe not. I had some bosses did not like the fact that I was a nice guy. They're like, you got to be tougher. Well, no, you don't. I can get the same thing and probably have a better relationship with either the people I work with or the people that I'm working with in another country by being a good person. And that's why people love America, right? They love us because we're good people in our core, and we want to do the right thing, right? That's to me, that's the most important thing. And this is something else I tell my kids. It's like, you don't have to have all the answers, but just find people that you can talk to, that you can trust, that'll help you navigate that space. And they're there. People are there. People want to help. I don't think people are inherently evil and nasty and trying to screw you.
I was about to ask you that. Do you think, like, you've dealt with all types of personas and a lot of bad actors who want to do harm? Do you feel that you've ever looked at someone and said, I'm looking at somebody that's very dark or very evil?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, there's bad people out there. There's people you can't get to, right? And part of the challenge is knowing that and then figuring out how you can work with them to get whatever it is that you need to get, for whatever it is your mission is.
Who would that typically be? Would there be any type of scenarios where you would come across individuals like that, where you knew?
It just, honestly, no. I mean, it'd be great to say like every terrorist leader I met was this like, Dr. Evil character kind of thing, or Hitler or something like that. It's honestly, no. I mean, it's the people who are really just selfish, and you have that in organizations. There are people like that in the agency, but there's wonderful people, right, as well. And you can pick it up pretty quick. People who are out for themselves and move in those directions. And either you distance yourself from them or you try to figure out how to navigate through them, and utilize it to whatever end you have to. But yeah, I wish there was it was that black and white.
I don't think it is. Honestly, like every terrorist or terrorist sympathizer I ever interviewed, they were nice to me. They were really nice to me.
Yeah.
I mean, they would look at me and say, oh no, I've done this and this and this, and I've helped carry out these attacks. But they were always very courteous in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And it was hard because I went and I actually sent myself to school to learn Arabic.
Okay.
Because I knew when I would be sent out to interview them, someone like myself, being a female, looking the way I do, I was like, these guys are just they're gonna see me and they're gonna be like, who is this? Almost, I don't know, I even insulted to see me walk into the room to talk to them. And so I kept thinking I have to find common ground. What can I do? And one of the ways was to learn Arabic. I was like, well, I better learn and try to connect with people because I just wanted information. I wasn't there to judge.
Right. No, learning the language is really key. Understanding the culture, respecting the culture, even though it's not yours. And to me, a big part of it was understanding the religion and the faith. When I would have talks with people, because I studied Islamic philosophy and I understood it pretty well. And to be able to do that in Arabic with people, especially the people on that side, or terrorists or extremists, it was interesting because you would see how little they understood of their own faith. And then they would get upset that you understood it that well. So I would get a lot of times, because I kind of look Arab, but and especially when I had more hair, I figure I'll blame somebody else for the hair loss. But and I had the beard and the whole thing, and so I'm Italian and my grandmother's Assyrian, and so I'd speak Arabic and I come in and they're like, "Are you Muslim?" And I'm like, "No." They're like, "What do you mean you're not Muslim? But you understand what's going on?" I'm like, "I'm not." They're like, "What are you?" I'm like, "I'm Catholic." And they're like, you can't be Catholic. And I'm like, I am. Like, it's pull out the rosary beads kind of thing. It blows their minds, but it also levels it, because they have these impressions of us as being these arrogant Americans who come in and claim to know everything, and they're bringing their horrible society and culture, and they're not willing to adapt to us or want to be part of it. And when you can level set that, like you did when you speak Arabic, or and you listen, which is what I said is a really important quality in doing this kind of work, it's amazing how it brings you can actually then start having discussions. And I'm never going to agree with what they've done, ever, right? I think it's horrible what they've done. And I think they've bastardized their faith for whatever reason, and they don't understand it. But we can have a discussion, we can have an understanding, and you can try to build that understanding and say, look, we need to understand better what we can do to be able to make the world a better place. How? Explain to me, tell me, and move forward with that.
What's the hardest situation or scenario that you can share? Because I know like some things you can't, but what would be maybe the most hardest or difficult or maybe dangerous scenario you found yourself in and you had to move through?
It's when you're talking to somebody who has blood on their hands, somebody who's, or honestly, somebody who has like gone after you personally. You know that they've done this, they've worked against you, but you still have to work with them.
So you've experienced that where they've, as much as you can share, like in what context would this be?
So we have, like, for instance, everybody has their political agendas overseas, and well, for whatever reason, some people may want to cooperate with you, some of them may not. Oftentimes you have to work with these people, and so they may be working against you quietly to undercut the things you're trying to do, but you still have to figure out how to make it work. Right. And so you're aware of this, and you're kind of.
Would these be people in other governments or?
Yeah, it could be other governments or the organizations, that you're cooperating with in different countries in different capacities. Yeah, that's hard. I learned to kind of swallow, and that's where it becomes okay. Like I'm kind of eyes wide open, right? I'm prepared. And so I'm going to do my plans. I'm going to have my benchmarks, and we're going to move forward, and I'm going to hold you accountable, and you hold me accountable. If you change your mind and you see I'm a different person than you think I am, or that I'm on your side, great. If you don't, you're playing your own game then at that point. So
how dangerous is the job? I mean, I can, from a U.S. Secret Service perspective, I know how dangerous my job was, but how dangerous is the job that you did?
If you do the job right and you're prepared, then there shouldn't be any danger, right? I mean, it's people that go into situations unprepared that get in trouble. I used to tell my officers, if you come back and tell me some sexy story, I'm going to get pissed at you because you fucked up, right? You didn't prepare, right? Look at me. Like, I've never run anywhere, right? I don't jump from balconies. Like, Jason, but I'm not jumping on some motorcycle and racing down the street, right? I'm not pulling out guns and shooting people and stuff, right? I joke that I ate for my country for 29 years, right? But I think was I always successful and never had problems? No, but you try to do the best you can to be prepared for the situations you walk into. Why eyes wide open? You don't race towards trouble, right? You don't race towards problems. You see a massive crowd that's getting together, and you hear loud people screaming. You don't necessarily. I'm going the other way. Like, I don't need to be there. I'll find out about what happened later, right? I don't have to be in the mix of it. There is, of course, there's danger in anything, especially in other countries if you're unaware of what you're doing. But you don't race into situations. You have to judge, and that's part of the job too. Is like, does it make sense for us to do this? Is the squeeze worth the juice?
Do they teach you that, like how to assess danger or judge, or is that common sense or intuition?
I think they try to teach. I mean, can you really teach that? It's more experiential, and you learn from each other, and you learn from other colleagues, and by situations as well. And that's why, I mean, look, the agency, I'm sure Secret Service is similar to the Bureau, have some unbelievable leaders and some people who've done amazing things and been in really, really difficult situations. And when I find myself in situations to this date, I say, what would this person do? What would this person do? These leaders who help guide me, how would they react to these situations? And it's usually take a breath, okay, where are we? Nothing is really that important, right? At the end of the day. And so how do we navigate this space safely to move forward and make sure we're protected?
So what do you think is the biggest myth that people have in their head when it comes to CIA? A lot of people think a lot of things. What's probably one of the myths that you've heard or hear that you can dispel?
I think people stereotype. I think people stereotype. I think people watch a lot of movies, and Homeland or whatever. Pick one, and that there's a tactical nature to how agency people are presented that I think is not necessarily correct. I think I think you also they tend to politicize the organization more than I think it is in reality. You have a lot of people who love our country, who want to help and do the right thing, and basically join the agency to make sure our policymakers are informed correctly. It's not all about compromising people and hurting people and destroying institutions and democracy and taking freedoms away and all this, which I think sometimes that you get shrouded with those kinds of things which aren't accurate at all. To me, I worked with people who love, honestly, the leadership, all the people I came up with to this day love our country, would do anything for it. If the agency called, they would come running to help in any way possible. And the people that I worked with overseas are the same ilk. Now there's other people that didn't, who were out for themselves, but the ones who are truly, committed to the organization or committed to the reasons behind it, that's I think people don't necessarily see that. That's not sexy. That's not going to make a good TV show. That's not going to make a good short story, right? But that's the nature of it.
You're very grounded and very even keeled. The average person's watching this and they're like, look, I want to be even keeled. I want to have the temperament that John has as far as like when I'm dealing with difficult things. Like,
drink a lot. No. No, it's like I think it becomes, I've had a lot of challenges in my life, and a lot of issues that I've had to deal with, and it helped me put things in perspective of what's important in life and where. And so I think understanding where your priorities are is key. Is your family, your kids, those kind of health, all of those things really are the things at the end of the day that matter, right? We used to say, like, if at the end of the day my tombstone says, John Franchi, chief of station in this place, then I did it wrong, right? To me, that was wrong. The priorities, like for me, are my boys, my wife, my family. That's the most important thing to me. I say to people, take a breath, relax. Like, people are so high strung, like, just give it a minute. It's sort of like, what we used to say, I don't know if they did this in the Secret Service, but like, don't send an email, like a harsh email immediately. Give it a night to like, and then if you feel the same way in the morning, send it. I think that's how you should go through stuff. I mean, don't make decisions on an impulse. Think things through. Try to understand the other side. Again, take a breath and listen. My grandfather used to tell me, you might be an idiot, but don't open your mouth and prove it, kind of thing. Like, well, just listen to people. You'll learn something from people, and then that'll inform whatever it is you decide to do. But again, making sure you take a breath, count to 5 before you react to stuff is important, I think.
Given we talked before about the future and like 3 months out, 6 months out, if you had to say what are the 3 most important things every person should do to just shield themselves to some degree, what do you think, what would those 3 things be?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think having a go bag is probably not a bad idea, but where are you going to go, right? So that's part of it.
John's house.
John's house. There you go. I got a barn in the back. Come on over. What I tell people, and I do this for myself, is I try to be as prepared as I felt like I should have been for COVID. Like, so do I have, some food on hand, some just basic batteries, just normal common sense stuff. Like, I was on a phone call with a friend's daughter not long ago, and she's like, should I buy those stuff to be ready in case of a radiation attack? I'm like, no. Like that to me, like is what are those pills you're supposed to take? Like if you're in the
I'm like, what is this?
I can't remember, like iodine or whatever these pills. Like she was telling me things I'd never heard of before, and I thought I knew things pretty well. I'm like, no, like
I've never heard of that either.
exactly. No, I said, but like think of like if you're gonna go camping, right? Let's imagine power goes out for 3 or 4 days. How are you gonna, be ready? How are you going to be able to address if there's an emergency, if there was a big storm, if there was another COVID outbreak? Would you be prepared for something like that? That to me is like the limitations of how, because look, if we get hit with if there's a nuclear war tomorrow, I don't even know if I want to live through the damn thing, right? Never mind, like I'm going to bury myself in the ground and live down there for 6 months and then come crawling out like a, Poxitani's Phil or whatever to find out if it's still fall. It's crazy, right? So I mean, so being prepared I think is important, but like not to the absolute extremes of like I think where people see the end of society coming and zombies coming across the borders. I tell people like just I can be aware of what's going on, or not just on the bigger issues. I mean, look, it's good to understand what's happening in Gaza, and that we could have a regional, fight where, the Israelis then go into, or there's a fight between Lebanon and Israel, and then could the Jordanians be involved, and what about the Iranians, and blah, blah, blah. But also know what's going on in your own society, what's in your town, what's happening, what are the important issues? Are there increased thefts? Are there burglaries? Is fentanyl an issue for your town? Be aware of what's closer to home, because that's really what's going to affect you, at least in the near term. Understand what your kids are going through. Talk to your kids. Or if your kids won't talk to you, find somebody that they can talk to, and that you can at least be there to be helpful for them and what they need. And just try to keep that communications open. I mean, those to me are the most important things, at least at this point. Yeah, there's a lot of issues. Cyber, again, I worry about cyber attacks. Again, I cherish the pictures of my kids when they're little. I have documents and banking statements and all those things that I care about. I don't want to have all the paper. I've got it online. Back it up. Make sure you have it, and make sure you have whatever it is you need. So
with that, like, I want to break it down simple. So it's back up everything on a drive, is what you're saying.
Yep.
And you talked about password.
Yeah.
I've seen the tips that they give, but what's the best way to do your password? Just super simple for folks. Like, what should they be doing with their passwords?
They have those online password things where the lock things.
Yeah.
Again, to me, I don't like keeping things online. Again, maybe I'm just old school.
I'm about to high five you.
I'll
tell you in a second why.
I just don't trust it. Like, I mean, I don't know. I'm sure it's good. I'm sure people are going to be screaming at you that don't listen to this old fogey. He doesn't know what he's talking about. But I like having things that I can reach and touch. But I try to update them on a maybe monthly or a quarterly basis, and make sure I have different passwords, right? I trust the tech to a point, right? I don't feel like it's a Terminator and the tech's going to eat me alive, but I just worry that I've had so many instances, probably like you in your career, where you write a document and it goes away, right? And I freak out, right? So I'm always printing out stuff, and it drives my wife crazy, but I just, in case I lose it, right? So to me, that's, updating your passwords, having dual authentication, understanding, and I think a lot of people don't do this, like, where are your accounts? Do you understand where your accounts are? Do you understand what your account numbers are? Like, if you needed it, like tomorrow, where your documents are. Like, where's your birth certificate? Where's your marriage certificate? Where are these things? Most people, like, you put it in a file and you just leave it there. Have like, to me, that's a more important go bag to have than to have a bag with money and clothes and different passports and all those things in. Know where all the stuff is, because God forbid you need that quickly, so you can pull it. Like, that's key.
I'm laughing with the password thing. So I don't, and I've not used any of these password protector. I'm not saying I can't judge, but like you, I am very cautious with technology. I like it to a point. I legitimately handwrite all my passwords. I have a notepad, a spiral pad, and I've got pages and pages of pages. Every account has its own password, and it's like X amount of letters long, and it's on paper. And it's literally, because my mindset is, if somebody wants my passwords, they have to literally break into my home to get the thing, to break into my account. So I'm laughing internally, because I thought it was just me. So I feel like it's just, because I'm like, how do I know what systems they have in place to secure?
Yeah.
Like, tech is only okay to a point.
Yeah. I know my own limitations too, right? It's just like, I'm like, am I going to be able to get them when I need them? I don't know. To me, it's, again, I'm maybe a little bit
I'm
more old
paper, I'm
school.
hard copy,
Right.
everything.
Exactly.
Everything.
It doesn't hurt to do it, right?
Everything.
Make sure you get your records, that kind of thing.
Yes. Today you're a fixer.
Yeah.
Okay. What is that exactly?
What I love to do, like,
Because you're retired.
yeah, I went to work for a company in the city. It was a good experience. I learned a lot, but I realized that wasn't for me. I'm a case officer, right? I love meeting, I love working with people, building networks, and solving like hard problems. Like that to me, like that's what the agency does. It gets impossible problems, and it's asked to solve them. And what I love is challenges like finding out back information for people that's impossible to get, and not illegal, but like, just really difficult, challenging problems that people have. I feel like people are expected to have all the solutions and they don't necessarily have them. And not that I do either, but I think I've got a lot more experience in dealing with those kinds of things through the agency and through other things I've been dealing with. So when we created the company, the station, we call it Station Services, which is, I had a little fun with that.
Chief of station.
There you go.
Station.
No, this is my wife's chief of station. Let's get it right here. Priorities. But it was about how can I, talk to, not just high net worth individuals, but people in general and companies, and sensitize them to these kinds of issues, and be able to help them navigate these spaces that, the questions nobody wants to ask because they're embarrassed to ask. They don't know who to ask. Right? And if I don't have the answer, and I don't always do, but I know people to be able to make that happen. What I loved in the agency, one of my lines in the agency was, we're a Make-A-Wish Foundation for people with access, right? So if you have access to information we care about, my job is to make your dreams come true, whether it's, I don't know, it's whether you need money or whatever it is you need to do, or, to whatever the challenge is that you're facing, or you want to go to some high-end restaurant, or you want to get into a certain football game or whatever. So being able to help people in that way, and help them understand like the challenges that they face, and be able to give them those solutions, and through the network possibly, that I have, to be able to help them there too.
What are some of the problems then? You said the problems they're embarrassed to ask. Like, what would be an example or something like that?
Well, a lot of times, I mean, like if you're a CEO of a big company, you're expected to have all the answers, right? Not necessarily, and not ask all of the questions. I think a lot of times their problems are closer to home. So in understanding, like maybe protecting and making sure their kids are okay, making sure they're prepared but not over prepared, and kind of judge what do they need to actually do. Like to your earlier point, how do we need a go bag? Do I need to have like a tunnel under my house to be able to escape the city? Where do I escape to? How do I, I mean, some people have enough money that they can worry about problems like that, right? Or they can think about those kinds of things. So being able to be a sounding board a lot of times for people that they can trust. And look, I'm pretty good at keeping secrets too. And so like, being able to, like, I'm not going to go to your, internal, whatever, your HR, your whatever. It's we can have a discussion. You can ask for opinions on those kinds of things. Sometimes it's about helping people with deals, that they're looking for funding, they're looking for the right connections. Am I with the right person? I think I'm with the right person. Am I? They said that they control this country, they have access. Do they actually have the access that they say they do? And if they don't, who should I talk to? And again, through relationships and through understanding of how places operate, we're people with my background are a little bit better, situated to be able to help in those kinds of things. It's really every day is a little bit different, which is what I love about it. It's like you never know what phone call you're going to get from somebody and what problem they're going to have.
It's interesting as you're saying this, because your mindset is very antithesis to what most people's mindset is. You said, I like problems. I like to find solutions to problems. Most people spend their whole life avoiding problems.
Yeah. Or not dealing with them. Right. Or just ignoring them. Right.
Yeah.
So, and oftentimes that's what, like, I'll get a phone call, someone will ask me for my guidance. I'll tell them, they're like, okay, well, maybe. And then of course they go away, they come back a year later and the problem's exponentially larger. And it's like, okay, well, we'll deal with it. I think having everything solvable, and having that level of confidence, or you may not be confident, but at least imbuing that in others and letting them, and then getting and finding the solution for them. It's that I love that. I love being able to help people in that regard. I loved it in the agency. I loved being able to help the country, and I love being able to help people. And what's nice when you're in the private sector too is you can pick and choose. So if you run into one of those
It's like
people who's
dating.
nasty, I don't know about dating, but no, but you can pick and choose.
Yeah.
So if this is a person, because like I do my due diligence too, and like if this is just not a good person, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to be. That's not that's not why I'm doing this. You want to help people who deserve it, and that are good people and are trying to help in whatever it is that they're doing. And most people fall into that category. I have very few that aren't.
You read people to some degree, right? Because you're trying to figure out who somebody is. You've been doing this your whole career. What are some indicators where this is not a good person for me, or I need to be careful? Are there certain things that stand out that help you kind of move around people?
I mean, there's all kinds of like little games that you learn, and you watch how people breathe, or people breathing at the same rate as you, or how are they looking at you, and things like that. Are they touching their nose? I mean, is that a tell? I mean, he might have an itchy nose, right?
Mine's itchy right
There you go.
now.
Exactly. Oh boy, that tells me everything. Honestly, what I believe is like I don't listen to what people say. I look at what they do. To me, that tells me if someone's good or not. You can say whatever you want. You can blow smoke, and say a lot of bullshit. But at the end of the day, your actions are going to speak for your words. So what I try to do is I listen. I find out what somebody's problem is, or just when I'm meeting new people. And then when you start to hear stories about them, or you start to see how they act, and you're like, wait a minute, like, where's that coming from? I thought this was like a really nice person who just got compromised. They're as big a scammer as anybody else. Okay, that like informs me as to what I want to do, or how I want to continue, if I want to continue with somebody. And look, I'm too old now at this point. Like I had a wonderful career, amazing time, wonderful friends. I get to pick and choose now. And I know who I am, and I get to be able to choose who I want to work with. And so that's what I look at for that. I have people that I respect, and that I have long-term relationships with, and I look to them too sometimes to vouch for people, because I trust their judgment too. So having that kind of inner circle or close circle of friends and confidants that you can trust is really important.
Well, that's how I came to you, or vice versa.
Exactly. Oh, so, and now you're stuck with me for forever. So,
You brought up the election, so I'm going to ask you, looking ahead, what does it look like if? And this, I mean this from, I'm Switzerland when it comes to stuff.
Yeah.
I've protected presidents. When people talk to me about politics, I I just glaze over. I don't want to hear it. Not in a mean way. I'll listen, but I never contribute. But what does it look like, I guess, future-wise? If Biden wins, what does it look like? If Trump wins, what does it look like?
I mean, does
it look different, or does it not?
I mean, I think it looks different. I mean, I think a lot of people are holding their breath right now. If it's Biden or if it's Trump, nobody knows real. A lot of countries too aren't really sure how to proceed. I mean, with Trump, I think a lot of people are concerned overseas, at least, that there's so much uncertainty with him, that because he communicates his feelings directly, unlike Biden or normal presidents in the past. And so you don't really necessarily know what's coming until the next tweet comes out. And so is that going to happen? I get kind of frustrated when I keep hearing people say that it'll be the end of democracy if Trump wins. I mean, give me a break. Like, I don't think that's true. Like, I'm not trying to be, again, partisan one way or the other, but we're a pretty strong country. We're not going to go down these roads. We have people that are going to stand up for it. We have systems in place. We have a system of government that is there for that purpose. So, do I necessarily agree with everything Trump wanted to do or what he says? No, right? But that's how it works. Read American history. We've had leaders in the past that we've had crises and problems in the past. We've gotten through them, right? Because we've been true to who we are and the country we are. With Biden, again, he's I think he's a great American, but does he have the capacity to lead? I mean, that's where a lot of these things are coming up with him right now. It's not ageism. Does he have the ability to lead? And I think that resonates in other countries as well, where they look at him and they see that he's weak or he's not capable. How does that reflect on the rest of the government moving forward? So, I used to always say, like, it didn't matter who was president, right? Because it was the same. I mean, look, our policies really never changed that much. What I found is the president would send a message internationally to like to the world as to like us as people, as well as they would instill confidence. Like, to me, that's the difference. I don't think with either of them we're going to head down towards we're going to self-destruct. But what I worry about is, again, that we lose perspective over the long term, and that we're not consistent and we don't follow up as to who we are in our decisions moving forward. That's where our weakness is. And you can't blame that on Trump. You can't blame that on Obama, Clinton. It started years ago, decades ago, many presidents ago, and it just compounded itself over time. I think if we can break that, that's how we regain any things that we've lost internationally.
What do you mean by that? The weaknesses over the years. What would that
Well,
be?
again, like as I was saying, like we tend to forget our past. We tend to forget our commitments,
Our promises.
our promises, and so people don't know if they can trust us. But for a lot of times, we're the only game in town, right? Now China is becoming more present and more of an option. The Russians are too. The world's changing. So people are hedging their bets more, or countries are hedging their bets. They're playing both sides. Okay, I still have my relationships. Look at a lot of the Gulf states. I'll still have my relationships with the U.S., but I'm also going to set up some parallel relationships with the Chinese or the Russians or whatever, to make sure, just in case. I got to make sure we're going to be okay. We got our own interests. The world's changed. We can't just ignore certain things and just assume people are going to keep coming back to us because we are who we are. Right? We should learn from, what was it, Blockbuster, right? Remember that company?
Yeah.
Right? They thought they had it all, right? Locked in, and then boom, they went away. We got to be a little bit more nimble, like Netflix, and adapt and be able to be responsive and be consistent. That's really, I think, the most important thing to me for the United States. We have the power. We've got the best people, the best resources, the best minds, all of it, easily, hands down. But if we're not consistent about it, then we're going to lose. We're going to continue to lose.
You lose trust.
You lose trust. Yeah. You lose trust.
You lose trust. I can't take you on your word.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's key. And you can't go back. Or it takes a long time to rebuild it.
I remember when I transitioned out of the U.S. Secret Service, it was a hard transition because you don't realize like the world that you're in, and then you go out. So what was that like for you? Because you were there even longer. Like, what was that process like? Was it hard?
Yeah, it was hard. I mean, part of what I loved about the agency was the people I got to work with, right? I mean, it's nice now. There's some people you never want to work with, right? Again, but I love the people. I love the challenge, and I love the kind of the transient nature of it. Like every 3 years, you had a new set of challenges to get smart on, right? And it's all I knew. I mean, I did it from the age of 21, right? And it was a little bit. It was like a baptism by fire going into the private sector, a little bit of, okay, I felt like I knew how it worked, sort of, but, I remember people asking me when I was getting close to leaving, what do you want to do? And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, well, what can I do? Like, I mean, it was because I had never really had to ask myself that question before. Or if I asked myself that question, it was always within the same the agency context with the mission. The mission was very clear. And that was something I struggled with on the outside of, what's my mission? Like, I need a mission. I need something, purpose to get up in the morning. And it's not to sell XYZ product, or it's not to, that wasn't enough for me. And so I struggled in the beginning. It took me some time to kind of navigate to eventually, when I started the company, to figure out, okay, here's what my mission's going to be moving forward. And I kind of reflected on who I was as a person as I developed in the agency, and tried to stay as close to that as I could without, being in it and being in the organization. What helped us also is being involved in like various organizations. fundraising for fallen officers, for their kids, for their families, helping to contribute to that, getting more involved in my son and his activities, and with autism, and trying to figure out ways in which I could contribute there. Yeah, that to me was important, and just helping people understand what was going on. And one of the things I gained from the agency was to be able to look at an issue in an apolitical way. And so if I could help people understand things in an apolitical way, so they could then make their own judgments for it, great. As opposed to now everything's tainted in one direction or another. Just let's see what the facts are and where they're going to take us. So it was challenging. It's still challenging. I still miss it. I just think it's an amazing organization. I encourage young people to consider it, because it really helps you. It helped me become, I feel like a good American. It allowed me to help my country in ways that I don't think I even realized before I joined it. So.
I got in not at 21, but it was pretty much right after college. Maybe I was 23, because I went college, then NYPD.
Okay.
And then U.S. Secret Service. So I grew up, like, when my friends were out in the clubs doing their thing, I'm, standing post in Egypt for President Bush and, working cases. And I grew up in there.
Yeah.
And it taught me to be a good person. And I was brave because I was around other brave people.
Yeah.
I was confident because I was around other confident people. And it's infectious, like what it does, and I don't know what my daughter's going to do, and I don't know what your path is, but.
Well, you want to surround yourself, I think, and to your point, you want to surround yourself with people who are smarter than you,
yes,
who are better than you,
yes,
who are more aggressive than you, like who are the people you want to be. Like I still do that. I
want to be the dumbest person in the room.
Absolutely. You want to live in the worst house in the best neighborhood, and you want to be the stupidest person in the room, so that you get challenged, and you have to push yourself. And that's something, again, I try to tell my kids: hang out with smart people, hang out with the people you want to hang out with. Because if you hang out with a bunch of losers or a bunch of people who are not pushing themselves, that's exactly who you're going to be. And in the agency, Secret Service, all the government agencies, those are not slackers.
No.
Like, people don't join those organizations to be slackers. They join those things to have a contribution, and that pushes you to do the important things in life. And that's what I loved about the agency, is I always felt pushed. I always felt like I was the least capable person on a team, and I had to really work to be able to to show my value, to show that I was worthy of that role.
Being there.
Yeah.
When I used to do the polygraphs for HR for the U.S. Secret Service.
Oh, boy.
Nobody likes the polygrapher. I mean, I had to take my fair share of polygraphs. And one of the questions I would ask in the room, I would say, why do you want to do this job? Why do you want to be a U.S. Secret Service agent? And I get two types of responses. One response would be typically, I want to do something, I want to challenge myself, and I want to see if I can do this, and I. And then the other type of response I would get is, I want to serve my country.
Yeah.
I want to help. I want to do something bigger than myself. And the people who, one, made it through training, and then two, did stellar on the job, was the latter.
Yeah.
The ones who actually I knew would make it through the process was the latter. The ones whose focus was not on me, but on what am I doing and how am I contributing? What is my purpose here? Yeah. And I just started to see that pattern.
Yeah.
And that's the type of people it typically, not always, pulls in. And I think it just helped me. And it was hard when I transitioned out, because you're leaving that environment. And I'm not saying one environment's bad and not. It's just different. And these agencies, like, man, they pick you. It's like, I'm going to put you here, and I'm going to give you all this power and this influence and this authority. Are you a good person? Can I trust you? Yeah. And I think that was the biggest thing too, is trust, which we initially, like, we opened up with trust. Like, I'm going to give you all of this. I have to trust you. I can teach you everything else. I didn't take a single criminal justice class. Not one. I teach it now. Yeah. I don't even know if it existed when I went to college, to be fair.
Right.
I didn't take a single criminal justice class. I didn't know anything about law enforcement, zip, zero, zilch. But because I went through this hiring process and they trusted me and they felt that I cared, that we'll teach you everything. And they did. Mm-hmm. I learned everything in training. I knew nothing about nothing. Zero. That's truth be told. I used to get pulled over by NYPD cops and be like, you know, I was from Queens, New York. I couldn't help myself. I was a little brat. Why are you pulling me over? Blah, 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 blah. But then life took me in a different direction. So, you know what? Best thing I ever did in my life.
Absolutely. Yeah.